The fine silk of her hem is now caked with the grime of a world she only read about in novels, a world that smells of horse manure, sweat, and the sharp tang of fear. She was a daughter of privilege, now a ghost in stolen servant's garb, fleeing a gilded cage for the unforgiving horizon. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe survival can lead to love, hit like and subscribe for more. Her past is a silken web of expectations and a future already bartered away. Her present is the dust on her tongue and the desperate hope that a blacksmith's fire might offer more than just warmth, perhaps even a place to hide a truth too dangerous to speak. Now, the story of Evangeline, and the man of iron who would unknowingly hold the key to her fate, begins. The town of Redemption was little more than a handful of weathered buildings clinging to the edge of a vast, indifferent prairie. Evangeline, who now called herself Eva, had stumbled into it on legs that felt like brittle sticks, her throat raw from dust and unshed tears. The grandeur of her father's Boston mansion, with its stifling velvet drapes and the chilling pronouncements of her arranged marriage to Silas Blackwood, a man whose touch she imagined would be like cold marble, felt like a distant, nightmarish dream. Now, reality was the biting wind, the suspicious stares of rough-clad men, and the gnawing emptiness in her belly. Her disguise, a coarse wool dress pilfered from a laundry line during her desperate flight, chafed her skin, a constant, irritating reminder of her fallen state. Her gaze, desperate for any sign of honest labor, any refuge from the open road, fell upon the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. A blacksmith's forge, its open front glowing like a welcoming hearth against the encroaching dusk. Smoke, thick with the scent of coal and hot iron, billowed from its chimney. This was a place of making, of strength. Perhaps it could be a place of forgetting, or at least, of temporary oblivion. She approached, her heart a frantic bird against her ribs. The blacksmith, stripped to the waist, his back a landscape of corded muscle gleaming with sweat in the firelight, paused in his work, hammer held aloft. He turned, and his eyes, the color of storm clouds, swept over her, missing nothing, the too fine bones beneath the dirt on her face, the tremor in her hands, the ill-fitting servant's dress. He was a man carved from the raw elements of the frontier, stern and unyielding as the anvil he commanded. "Looking for something, miss?" His voice was deep, roughened by soot and years of shouting over the roar of the bellows. Eva swallowed, forcing down the cultured tones that would betray her. "Work," she managed, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Any work. I can clean, I can. I can learn." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. She saw doubt there, suspicion, but perhaps, she prayed, a flicker of something else. Pity? Or just the pragmatism of a man who might need an extra pair of hands, however unskilled. Her own hands, soft and pale despite her attempts to roughen them, were clutched before her. "Hands like yours ain't seen a day's honest labor," he stated, not unkindly, but with bald truth. "I learn fast," she insisted, a spark of her old fire igniting within her. "And I need the work." Desperately. Caleb, she would learn his name later, lowered his hammer. He gestured with his chin towards a small, lean-to structure attached to the forge. "Got a cot in the back. Keep the place swept, mend my clothes, see to a hot meal now and then. Won't be much pay, but it's a roof." Relief, so potent it nearly buckled her knees, washed over Eva. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you." The days that followed were a blur of relentless toil. The forge was a beast, demanding constant feeding of coal, its heat a suffocating blanket. Eva swept floors thick with metal filings and soot that worked its way into every pore. She scrubbed Caleb's work clothes, her knuckles raw, the harsh lye soap stinging. Her attempts at cooking were initially disastrous, resulting in burnt offerings and watery stews, but Caleb ate them without complaint, his silence a curious form of patience. Her body ached with a weariness she'd never known, a deep, cellular exhaustion that sleep barely touched. The soft silks and polished ease of her former life were phantoms, taunting her with their remembered comfort. Yet, with each blister that formed and calloused over on her hands, with each dawn she forced herself to rise before the sun, a strange, new resilience took root. Caleb remained a figure of quiet industry. He spoke little, his movements economical and precise as he shaped raw iron into tools, horseshoes, and intricate pieces of hardware. Eva watched him, fascinated by the raw power and artistry of his work. He was a creator, wrestling beauty and utility from the stubborn heart of the metal. He moved with a grace that belied his size, the muscles in his arms and shoulders bunching and releasing like powerful currents beneath his skin. Sometimes, their paths would cross in the small shared space. A silent passing of a mended shirt, her fingers brushing his calloused hand for a fleeting second. A shared glance over the flickering embers of the forge fire late at night, when the day's work was done and a fragile quiet settled over them. He never pried, never asked about the shadows in her eyes or the way she sometimes flinched at unexpected noises. He simply accepted her presence, her labor, her silence. And in his stoic acceptance, Eva found a strange kind of peace. The townspeople, a mixture of stern-faced matrons and curious, weathered men, would sometimes cast assessing glances her way. Whispers followed her, the blacksmith's new girl, but Caleb's silent, formidable presence seemed to keep the worst of the curiosity at bay. One sweltering afternoon, while sorting through a pile of discarded rags for mending, Eva's fingers brushed against something small and hard tucked deep within the pocket of her stolen dress. Her breath hitched. It was a miniature locket, intricately carved silver, a gift from her mother years ago. She'd forgotten it was there, a tiny, glittering link to a life she was desperate to sever. Her initials, E.A., were delicately engraved on its surface. Her heart hammered. This was a dangerous tether. She had to dispose of it. Later, when Caleb was shoeing a particularly fractious horse, its owner loudly complaining, Eva slipped out to the small creek behind the forge. With trembling fingers, she opened her palm, the locket cool against her skin. She should throw it in, let the current carry it away, severing the last tie. But her mother's face, gentle and loving, rose in her memory. A sob escaped her. She couldn't. Instead, she dug a small hole beneath the roots of an old cottonwood and buried the locket, marking the spot with a uniquely shaped stone. It was a compromise, a secret kept even from herself. The seasons began to turn. The fierce summer sun gave way to the crisp bite of autumn. Eva's hands were no longer soft, they were competent, stained, and strong. She learned to anticipate Caleb's needs in the forge, handing him tools before he asked, keeping the water trough filled, the fire banked just so. She even managed to produce a passable stew and a decent loaf of bread. The fear of discovery still lived in her, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overlaid now with a layer of quiet pride in her own survival, her own burgeoning capability. One evening, a chill wind rattled the loose shutters of the forge. Eva shivered, drawing her thin shawl tighter. Caleb, noticing, rose from the bench where he was oiling a newly forged hinge. Without a word, he retrieved a heavy wool blanket from a chest and draped it around her shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck, sending an unexpected jolt through her. She looked up, startled, into his dark, unreadable eyes. For a moment, the air crackled with an unspoken awareness. Then he simply nodded and returned to his task, leaving her wrapped in warmth that was more than just the wool. It was a fever that finally breached her carefully constructed walls. It came on suddenly, a chilling ague followed by a burning heat that left her weak and disoriented. She remembered stumbling, Caleb's strong arms catching her before she hit the dirt floor. Then, fragmented images, cool cloths on her forehead, the bitter taste of willow bark tea, Caleb's concerned face swimming in and out of focus. In her delirium, words tumbled out, fragments of her past, Silas, the wedding, father's study, must not find me. She spoke of silks and gaslight, of whispered threats and gilded cages, painting a picture starkly at odds with the soot-stained girl he knew. When the fever broke, she awoke weak but lucid, Caleb asleep in a chair beside her cot, his head slumped forward, his face etched with weariness. Shame washed over her. What had she said? How much had she revealed? He stirred, his eyes finding hers, concern warring with a new, knowing light. "Eva," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You were talking in your sleep." Panic seized her. She tried to sit up, to flee, but her limbs were like water. I don't remember." He held up a hand, a gesture that was both calming and commanding. "Rest now. We can talk later." But his gaze held a question, a depth of understanding that told her he knew. Or suspected enough. The next few days were fraught with a new tension. Caleb was kind, attentive, but there was an unspoken thing between them. Eva, regaining her strength, felt like a trapped animal. She had to run, before he could turn her in, before her past caught up with her. She began to gather her meager belongings, her heart heavy with a strange reluctance. This place, this man, had become a sanctuary, however rough. She was tying her few possessions into a bundle when he entered the lean-to. He watched her for a moment, his expression somber. "Running again?" he asked quietly. Tears pricked her eyes. "I have to. You must know I'm not who I seem." He nodded slowly. "I figured as much. Soft hands take time to harden. And servant girls don't usually speak of father's study or men named Silas with such fear." He paused, then took a step closer. "I found this, by the creek, after you were ill." He opened his hand. Lying on his calloused palm was her silver locket, cleaned of its earthy coating. Eva gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He knew. He truly knew. "Evangeline Ashworth," he said, reading the initials. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Despair washed over her. It was over. She sank onto the cot, her carefully constructed world crumbling. "My father, he arranged a marriage. To a cruel man, a powerful man. I couldn't. I wouldn't. So I ran." The words tumbled out, a torrent of fear and desperation. "They'll be looking for me. There's probably a reward." Caleb listened, his gaze unwavering. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the small space. He walked to the small window, looking out at the dusty street. "This Silas Blackwood," he said finally, his back still to her. "He'd bring trouble here if he found you." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I must go. I won't endanger you." He turned then, and there was a look on his face she couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of something fierce, protective. "And where would you go, Evangeline? Back to the road? How long before they find you then?" He took another step towards her. "Or you could stay. As Eva. Continue your work. Your secret is safe with me." She stared at him, incredulous. "But why? You don't owe me anything. Harboring me, it's a risk." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe I've grown used to passable stew. And a clean forge." His eyes met hers, serious now. "Or maybe I believe a woman has a right to choose her own path, even if it's a hard one." He extended his hand, palm up. "The choice is yours, Eva. Or Evangeline." Tears streamed down her face now, tears of gratitude, of relief, of a terror slowly giving way to a fragile, burgeoning trust. She looked at his outstretched hand, strong and steady, stained with the honest grime of his labor. A hand that had offered her shelter, tended her in sickness, and now, offered her a future, however uncertain. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, reassuring. "Eva," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My name is Eva." In the weeks that followed, a subtle shift occurred. The fear didn't vanish entirely, but it receded, replaced by a quiet determination. Knowing Caleb knew her secret and chose to protect her, forged a new, deeper bond between them. She worked with a lighter heart, even finding small moments of humor in the daily grind. She began to help more in the forge itself, learning to work the bellows with a steady rhythm, to sort scrap, her presence becoming a familiar fixture. The unspoken tension remained, but now it was laced with a simmering warmth, a growing awareness that flickered in their shared glances. Then, one crisp afternoon, as the leaves swirled in golden eddies down the main street, a dust-covered stagecoach rumbled into town. Two men disembarked, men whose tailored city coats and arrogant demeanor were starkly out of place in Redemption. Eva, fetching water from the town well, felt a cold dread grip her heart. One of them, tall and hawkish, with eyes like chips of ice, scanned the street. His gaze snagged on her. Recognition, cold and calculating, dawned in his eyes. It was one of Silas Blackwood's confidants, a man named Finch. He strode towards her, his companion a pace behind. "Miss Evangeline Ashworth, I presume?" Finch's voice was smooth, menacing. "Your father has been greatly distressed. And Mr. Blackwood is, impatient." Eva's blood ran cold, but she stood her ground, the water bucket suddenly heavy in her hand. Years of societal conditioning urged her to curtsy, to be demure. But the Eva forged in fire and sweat, the Eva who had earned her calluses, found her voice. "My name is Eva," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "And I am not returning." Finch sneered. "That is not your decision to make, my dear. We have men. You will come with us." Just then, the clang of the hammer in the forge ceased. Caleb emerged, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm. He took in the scene, Eva, pale but resolute, the two well-dressed strangers, their predatory air. He moved to stand beside Eva, not touching her, but his presence a solid bulwark. "This woman is in my employ," Caleb said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of iron. "She causes no trouble here. She stays." Finch's eyes narrowed. "This is a family matter, Blacksmith. And a matter of a breached contract with a very powerful man. Stand aside." "She said she's not going," Caleb repeated, his gaze as unyielding as the anvil in his forge. "And in Redemption, we tend to respect a person's word, especially when they've proven themselves honest and hard-working." A few townsfolk, drawn by the confrontation, had gathered, their expressions watchful, siding with the known, the respected Blacksmith, over these arrogant outsiders. Finch hesitated, looking from Caleb's formidable stance to the increasingly unsympathetic faces of the onlookers. Forcing the issue here, in this rough town that clearly held its blacksmith in high regard, might prove more troublesome than Blackwood had anticipated. With a curt, angry nod, he signaled his companion. "You will regret this, Miss Ashworth. Both of you." They turned, stalked back to the stagecoach, and a few minutes later, it rumbled out of town, leaving a cloud of dust and an almost palpable silence in its wake. The danger had passed, for now. Eva let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her legs threatening to give way. She turned to Caleb, her eyes wide, shining with unshed tears and a dawning, profound gratitude. The noise of the town seemed to fade, the dusty street, the curious onlookers, all receding until it was only the two of them, standing in the stark afternoon sun. She didn't speak, couldn't. Instead, she reached out, her calloused, work-stained hand finding his. His fingers, strong and warm, closed around hers. It wasn't the touch of a savior, or a master, but of an equal, a partner. He met her gaze, and in the depths of his storm-gray eyes, she saw not pity, but respect, and something more, something that mirrored the burgeoning hope in her own heart. A small, rare smile touched the corners of his lips. The forge behind them, with its comforting glow, seemed to promise not just a refuge, but a place to truly belong. The gilded cage was a distant memory. Here, under the vast prairie sky, with the scent of smoke and iron in the air, Evangeline, now truly Eva, had found her freedom, and perhaps, the beginning of something far more precious. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more.